Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm Trevor Scott here with my co-host Matt Giraldi,
What's going on, guys?
and we are back with Team 8 of our 32 team breakdown, finishing up the AFC North today with the Cleveland Browns.
So Cleveland, another team that was kind of a weird year for them last year. Like if you look at the record, 11-6, it's obviously very good. They made the playoffs, obviously very good. And then they just got manhandled
Yeah, they
by
got
Houston.
crushed by Houston.
I mean, that was one of the
45 to
most
14, I think. Yeah, just dominated.
I, I don't think my jaw was off the floor the whole time. Like I could not believe what was happening. That was an embarrassment. And, obviously losing Watson, early in the season hurt. They tried out DTR a couple times. And then they kind of, I don't want to say struck gold, but, they signed Flacco off the couch and, he played admirably. Like he was
They struck
fine.
gold with him, man. He was awesome.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And on the negative side, they lost Nick Chubb week 2, which is obviously very painful. Heading into this season during the offseason, they traded for Jeudy, which we'll obviously get into a little bit more on the fantasy component. Flacco's gone as a backup to the Colts. They brought in Ken Dorsey as the offensive coordinator. He spent some time. He was the quarterbacks coach with Carolina when Cam Newton, had his great run. He was the OC with Josh Allen in Buffalo. So, you know, we'll see. Like that seems like a decent hire. Who knows? But looking at the draft, this just is kind of painful, man. It's like the importance of a first round pick just cannot be understated. The
Yeah.
Browns only had 6 picks in total. They got a second round defensive tackle out of, I think it was Ohio State, who's, supposed to be a pretty good player, not necessarily an immediate position of need. Their third round, they got to the offensive guard, and he's not going to get on the field right away. They've got 2 Pro Bowl guards on the offensive line. So when I look at this draft, there it's hard to walk away from a draft with no immediate starters, in my opinion. I understand that they're planning from the future, and they've got some cap issues looking ahead. So I get that, and I'm sure the GM did the best with what he could with 6 picks, and you never know. I mean, fifth round picks can turn into gold, like we've seen year over year. But um, I don't know. Given how good this division is and how much other teams improved that we've discussed, I don't really picture them winning 11 games, but we'll see. We'll see if Watson can have a renaissance year, and obviously adding Jeudy, he hasn't really lived up to his first round expectations. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? I'll kick it to you for the fantasy side.
Yeah, the Jeudy part of it was something that I was going to elaborate on right now. Actually, is that
Mhm.
they didn't do too much in the draft in terms of offense, but they didn't have to because they traded for Jeudy. They still have Njoku. They got Chubb coming back off injury. They still have Ford on a rookie deal, and they obviously have Amari Cooper as their one. So like the offense is already all set up. And they have one of the best defenses in the league. I mean,
Mhm.
with Miles Garrett, it's just really good. They have a good secondary as well. So that fueled a lot of that 11-6. I mean, the reason that they were able to bring Flacco in, obviously Flacco was very productive, but they kept him up, right? Because the offensive line was good.
Mhm.
And the defense was able to just hold teams down. So I think they still can be very good, actually. I expect them to finish second or third in the division here. I don't. I always count the Steelers out before the year, so I definitely expect the Steelers to finish last in the division. And the Bengals, we'll see. I mean, obviously they have as much upside as anybody, but they haven't put it together for a couple of years now. So I think they have some trust to build back with most of the people that watch football. So I mean, they're starting to hear rumblings about Burrow, being injury prone and maybe shouldn't be in that upper tier of quarterbacks because he's got hurt back
Mhm.
to back years. So I think the Browns are right there. And I'll kick it off with Jeudy here because I think he's going to be the one that's the biggest question mark. Is I don't know if people are even counting on drafting him, but I think that he should be drafted in a pretty aggressive way here. there were, when we started the off-season preparation last year, it was like Jeudy was getting pushed up into like the 5th round of non-superflex leagues, the 6th, 7th round of superflex leagues, because he had such a hot finish to the year before in 2022. And so it's hard for me to just discount that because he ended up banged up and then out of favor, and then Russ just wasn't good. The offense under Peyton wasn't good. It you know, didn't really run very efficiently.
Mhm.
So I get that people are out on Jeudy. Okay, it's not like we're suggesting you pick him like that. He's the number 2 here, but we still have the pieces in place, and it's kind of interesting because it's a similar discussion around Deshaun Watson. But I actually really like Jeudy. He's going 57th among receivers, and I think maybe that's too low. I think that's probably way too low. I mean, this could be a decent offense. Chubb isn't going to be fully healthy to start the year. Uh, Watson, I mean, maybe they want to play a little ground and pound, and they have a good defense, so they don't need to throw it around. But like Jeudy is a much better player than Elijah Moore, I think. And I mean, maybe I shouldn't say much better because Moore is good in his own right, but I think Jeudy is going to be the 2. I think he's going to be the second target, and I think that Watson's going to benefit majorly from having him on the field. So I really do like that Jeudy pick. I think it was one of the most underrated pickups of the year, and that he's going to be successful here in Cleveland. So we can jump into the other receivers here now too. I alluded to Elijah Moore. I think he's relegated to the 3rd option, likely the 4th option in the passing game after Njoku. So I don't think that Elijah Moore, as much as I did like him last year, is really going to be a player that's going to get drafted. And then Amari Cooper is a very, very good player. He's going 24th amongst wide receivers right now. There's no way that draft position holds. He will be moving up the receiver rankings. He's just way too good of a one, way too much a focal point of the offense not to be considered better than 24th. So I think, I expect him to settle in that 16, 17, 18 range by the time we get to draft season here. So that's a breakdown on the receivers. What do you got for me there?
I like what you're saying about Jeudy at 57. I mean, as someone that had him on like 20% of my best ball teams last year, I kind of felt the sting of drafting him, whatever the 5th round or whatever you mentioned before. But just the high upside there. Cooper, I don't know. I go back and forth. I've never really had Cooper on my teams. But I get what you're saying with the talent and the quarterback and things like that. I guess I would have to just dig a little bit deeper into the wide receivers that are going to be going around him. But again, we saw him put up like 300 yards or something on Christmas Eve last, whatever ridiculous game that was. So like,
I lost to him in a league. It
yeah,
was just brutal.
yeah,
He put up so many points. He had like 45 points or whatever.
yeah,
I will say he doesn't have Flacco, right? I mean, that was a big part of it. Flacco just
yeah,
slinging it to Cooper for 3 touchdowns and 250
yeah.
yards.
And that's what I was gonna say about Njoku too. Like I feel like, last year I kind of hit the waiver wire jackpot with Njoku, and he was so good at the end of the year. And I
Yeah.
just think that was a product of Flacco. And like
Yep.
now I'm seeing it at tight end 9. I'm just like, if he's gonna be the number 3 option on a team that eventually wants to run the ball and will more successfully once Chubb comes back. I don't know. We've seen his ability to take over games and just be a freak of nature, but like he's only going to get 5 targets or something. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to shy away from him. Maybe I'll regret
Yeah.
it, but
I'm going to be shying away from him too. It's a Deshaun Watson thing. He doesn't throw to the tight ends
yeah.
very much. So it's like, it would be nice if he treated Njoku as a featured part of the offense. But I also think, that Jeudy coming in is going to be that second option. So I think Njoku is going to be relegated to 3rd, like you said, on a rushing team. And he's got upside. He's always been a talented player. He's a huge guy, but I
Yeah.
don't think he's going to be that much better than the tight ends that are going around him. I mean, Dallas Goedert, for example, is going 2 spots behind him amongst tight ends. I'd rather wait and take Goddard. If Njoku falls down to that range, or falls into like the Cole Kmet area of the draft, then I don't have a problem taking him. But at 9, I probably just am going to pass and take a different position there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then with Watson, they have him at 21, and I feel like I'm just gonna draft him everywhere if that's the case. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, he's a tough one because I don't think he's going to move up, right? I mean, he's going right behind Kirk Cousins. He's going right behind Matthew Stafford. He's going. I guess the argument in Superflex could be that he's not going to go ahead of Jaden McDaniels, geez, Jaden Daniels. What am I doing, dude?
McDaniels.
God, horrible, dude. You need to ring me out when I make mistakes like that more. Jaden Daniels, though, I mean that's the one guy that in a super flex league, when you need a starter, somebody who's maybe a little more consistent versus upside, I could see going with Watson over him. But um, quarterback's just really good. It's really deep, and Watson's ranked currently as the number one quarterback 3 in 10-team leagues. So somebody's going to have to, if you really want him, you either draft him as a starter or you risk missing out on and again, we're talking about this in the frame of super flex with 3 wide receivers, where you have 9 starting players, not including your kicker and defense. And if you reach and kind of take him as your 8th player, your 9th player, and you're not filling out your full lineup, I'm not sure I think he's that valuable. Even I keep going back to Derek Carr, the Derek Carr effect, but even Will Levis, any of the starters that are going to go, even Russ that we just talked about with the Steelers yesterday. It just feels like I'd rather go with one of those guys as my 3rd option, and make sure that I have a strong starting lineup everywhere. Make sure that I have a couple bench guys that I can lean on if I get in trouble with injuries. And so Watson's in this interesting range where I expect to already have 2 quarterbacks. And if I'm picking at him as my 3rd, it's just the very top end of the 3rd, and you're going to end up having to take him in a position where I think it's ultimately going to make you sacrifice somewhere else. So again, if he falls, I'm good with that. If I end up taking him as a starter because I don't have my 2nd quarterback by round 8 or round 9, then I'm much more interested in taking him. Like you said, there's a lot of upside. You feel like you're going to end up getting him everywhere, but I think there's an interesting dance having it be right around that QB2, end of QB2, beginning of QB3 range.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying from a draft and ADP perspective, but this time last year he was cemented in that tier of the top 8 quarterbacks, and
Yep,
then
he went in the
obviously
3rd round of our
hurt.
league. Yeah,
Yeah, and then he gets Jerry Jeudy and a new offensive coordinator. Like, I don't know, I just feel like I'm gonna be taking a shot on that upside quite a bit.
yeah, I don't blame you at all. I mean, the last time we saw, obviously when he was in Houston, he was a top 5 guy. He
Yeah,
still has all the upside in the world. And if he hits and you're getting him down at 20, you're going to end up in an extremely, extremely good spot. You're going to have one of the best teams in the league. So that's I think too why I say if you like Watson and you're in on Watson in a super flex league, right, and you're listening to us, you should plan to draft him as a starter. You should not plan to draft him as a backup, because then your roster gets crunched to a point where you end up at a disadvantage at other positions, even though your quarterbacks are extremely strong. I guess what I'm thinking of is I watched you draft last year, and
I
you
I was
drafted
just gonna
Lamar in
say,
the 1st round,
yeah.
you
Hmm.
drafted Tua in the 5th, and you just couldn't pass on Anthony Richardson in the 7th, and you had 3 quarterbacks in your first 7 picks, and obviously Richardson ended up getting hurt, but you weren't even able to trade him in the first couple weeks. Well, he was on and off the field. It's a bad example, because he was dealing with the injuries, and but I think even in the trade conversations, you were trying to leverage him as like a high end player, and everybody else
Right.
is looking at you like you can't start all these guys. It doesn't matter what you think he's worth now. Like, you
Yeah.
can't play him. We're going to give you 7th round value because that's when you drafted him, 8th round value because that's the range where you picked him, and so you had no leverage in a trade, and you ended up kind of diluting the rest of your roster a little bit. So from a construction standpoint, if you are in on Watson, if that's who you like, maybe find another guy down low that you would be comfortable starting just in case he does get picked, but go into your draft kind of planning to take him later. That would be my advice if you're in on
Yeah,
Watson.
that was the perfect example. That's exactly what I was going to say. Because if my strategy was to go after Richardson, then I would have taken AJ Brown with the first pick, for example,
Yeah,
and built that way. But yeah, painful memories of him, not being able to
yeah,
finish the season because I think he was going to have a pretty special year, man. And I hope, he can come back healthy and, do that. So,
yeah. And I think
uh,
he'll have a special year this year. I mean, we had the debate with Hamza about, is Anthony Richardson going to break out? And he was like, what are you talking about break out? He broke out last year. And it's like, yeah, well, I mean, obviously he was trending towards a major breakout, but if he keeps it all together, stays on the field this year, he's going to break out in a major way, I think. All the upside to be the top quarterback or in fantasy for sure. So, but we'll get into him during the Indy preview.
cool, man. Any last thoughts on Cleveland?
Well, yeah, we didn't even talk about Chubb or Ford yet, so we're going to get a little long on this episode, I think. But this team is very interesting. I think all of these guys are going to get drafted too. Elijah Moore maybe not, but getting into the running backs here, we got Nick Chubb coming off of a major knee injury, and then Jerome Ford, who was his backup last year. They brought Kareem Hunt back to kind of split or share some of the workload there with him. But Ford was still RB17, even though he didn't get to start in week 1 and was kind of,
Yeah.
Chubb got hurt going into halftime, I think, of week 2. So still was able to come in as RB17. I think it was very productive. He benefited a little bit in the passing game from Joe Flacco too, the statue that is Joe Flacco. So I don't expect that with Deshaun Watson, who's much more mobile, that the target share is going to be anything like it was coming down the stretch last year. But I don't expect Chubb to start the year healthy. And I don't expect that he gets healthy very fast into the year. That's my expectation. So seeing Jerome Ford down at 41, my personal opinion on it is that he's going to turn into a very popular 0 RB pick. If you decide to forego running back, you're looking deep, you're kind of trying to figure out who you're going to take, that he's a perfect player that you can start week 1. I don't think Chubb's going to be ready personally. Maybe he is. Maybe we get information that he's going to be playing, and that kind of dissipates that take. But I expect that he's going to be starting at least week 1. Maybe Chubb starts on the pup, and then it's 4 weeks, and we're in a really good spot with Ford as a 0 RB running back. He'll end up moving up from 41 if that's the case. And Nick Chubb, unfortunately, I mean, obviously, I love the player, one of the best running backs that we've had in the NFL over the last 4 or 5 seasons. He's not somebody I'm going to be drafting at 28. I mean, amongst running backs, there's just no way. With Superflex and with 3 wide receiver, especially, you're the Chubb factors coming in, in the 6th and in the 7th round, like possibly as a starter, possibly as your first bench player. It's just, he could end up winning you the title at the end of the year, but it's just so much strain on your roster when you need to draft so many players. So in a standard format, it makes a lot more sense for him to go to 28, right? You have all your starters already filled out, 2 wide receiver, 2 running back, and a flex. Maybe you play it standard. Like, it makes sense that he gets pushed up in those formats. But I think once you open up the rosters a little bit, if you're taking him even down in round 10 as your 3rd or 4th running back, it's just really, I don't know. I don't know how you do it and feel comfortable about the rest of your roster unless you really have a couple players later that you like a lot and think are going to be contributors early to your team. So that's my opinion on the running backs there. I will be drafting Ford a lot more than I'll be drafting Chubb, just because I can get him later. And it's not always the worst thing in the world to have somebody on your team that can get you off to a hot start and that you could end up cutting for, whatever waiver wire player comes along. So, yeah, that's my take on the running backs. And, I like Ford, and I really, really hope Chubb can get right. He's just not going to be on my team when he does.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one to watch, his health progression through camp and, throughout the summer, because, this is his second major injury. And, he's how old is he now? It seemed like he was at
29.
Georgia. Yeah, I was gonna say. So yeah, we'll see. And I agree with Ford for zero RB. Like you're kind of you get a starter you can lock in for a couple weeks most likely, and then figure out the carousel after that. So unless you want to dive into the RB3, any other thoughts on Cleveland?
No RB3. No more thoughts on Cleveland. And that actually wraps up our AFC North evaluations of each team from a fantasy perspective. We are 8 teams into our 32 team preview. If you're following along, you're enjoying the content, you're still with us here, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and we look forward to getting with you guys next week. We don't know exactly what we're doing yet, so maybe we do another mock draft Monday. Maybe we mentioned that we might get into like a Puka, AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson breakdown, so maybe we do that for next Monday. But we will be back with you guys next week, and Tuesday to Friday we'll be back with another division breakdown. So we look forward to seeing you guys next week. I appreciate the viewership, and we will see you guys then.
Later.